Hey friends, good morning. Hey, I wanted to talk for a second about the differences between discipline and punishment. Uh, I spoke to a group of homeschool kids yesterday, and we just had such an awesome conversation, hearing their little minds, not little, they're huge minds, just hearing their thoughts about, what they thought about why God said to discipline your mind and to not be a slave to your emotions, and how we as adults need to think about this when correcting our children. The Bible does say, he who does not discipline their child hates their child. And I firmly believe this to be true because when I was a school teacher and I worked with kids who were undisciplined, the, the child was destined for a life of, hardship because they hadn't learned how to control the primal urges that they had. They hadn't been told that, when your brain tells you to eat or you're hungry, well, your brain's just trying to keep you alive. Your brain doesn't like to be uncomfortable and isolated. Remember those two things. And our brain's going to tell us to eat when we necessarily shouldn't. It doesn't have a really good perception of reality. It's just we grew up throughout history coming through feast and famine, and when we had the opportunity to feast, our brain was going to tell us to feast. But today we have food around us all the time, so our brain just tells us to feast all the time, and look what it's done to our health as a nation, as a world even. And the same thing comes even when we're being physical. When our brain tells us and it feels uncomfortable, it feels pain, our brain doesn't like pain. So it tells us to stop doing what we're doing, and we have to work against our mind because it's trying to tell us to stop, and we're just trying to get stronger or improve our endurance. And it's a mental feat, not so much a physical. The same thing comes when children become of age and their hormones change and they become physically attracted to other humans. And the brain has a primal urge when those hormones are present to be physically intimate with other humans. And we must understand that we too have to learn how to control that urge, because for us as men, it changes our behavior. For women, the same. It changes our hormone levels, our lean muscle mass, all these things. When we continually succumb to those urges, and if we decide that we're just going to, go into the pornography side of things, and we say, oh, it's not hurting anybody, well, it's rewiring our brain if we don't learn how to control and discipline those urges. And now I'll talk for a second about how we as humans, to be corrected as children, perceive the difference between punishment and discipline. When an adult has a hard time harnessing or disciplining those negative emotions and disconnecting ourselves from what the child does that just pushes our buttons and pushes us over the edge, if we aren't able to control and harness that, and then we try to correct the child, what's going to happen is it's going to look like punishment. And what we're going to do is we're going to raise another adult that can't control their emotions. And the chain is just going to go on and on and on and on until we decide, hey, I'm not going to be a victim to those negative emotions. I'm going to learn how to harness it and control it and discipline it. And we control the volume of our voice. We control the words that come out of our mouth. And Gabor Mate talks at length about this on isolation. The definition of trauma to a child is when they are corrected with a negative emotion, an outburst from an adult. And so, they receive feedback, and then all of a sudden they are then isolated. So they receive both. They receive maybe a physical manifestation from the outburst of the adult, and then they also receive isolation. So a good example is a spanking that goes well beyond the limits of a spanking, and then they're told, go to your room. Well, a physical manifestation is okay as long as it doesn't cross that boundary, and then the child is immediately taken in, immediately reconnected to the adult, immediately. That is discipline, and it's done out of love. Punishment is done out of an inability to control emotions. And the only thing that's going to do, as I spoke before, is it's just going to continue to raise another adult that can't control their emotions or can't control their urges. Same, I mean, you could say the same thing about spending your money. I mean, we have, as a society, gone to the point where we are not disciplined people anymore. We go with whatever our irrational emotions tell us to do, and we're just a giant up and down ball of emotions. And the Bible says our emotions are going to deceive us. You know, there are different ways that, you know, men are sidetracked by our sight and women are sidetracked by their emotions. We are to be deceived by these things, and we have to know that going in. So I think this conversation just really hit me like a ton of bricks and really forced me to think. But the difference between us disciplining our children, which is what we have to do in this world, if we raise a child that is undisciplined, they are destined for a life of just, you know, rigidity and cacophony and disappointment. But if they are disciplined, I believe firmly that aside from all the knowledge we could try to shove down their throat from school, a child that's disciplined is going to be successful. Case done, over with. In schools today, parents today, we are just programmed not to discipline our kids. And it's not the school's job. It's us, the parents' job. We have to, if you're going to send your kids to school, they've got to go there disciplined, because if they're not, they're going to be unraveled by being intermixed with all the children that are not disciplined and do not have a sense of control. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great weekend this weekend. Much to think about. Love to hear your stories or commentary or testimony or whatever you have to say about the subject. And I'll see you guys on Monday. Have a good one. Bye.